Will you have after 500 years?
I still have you.
You guys ever lose your wallet and you wonder, man, I really wish I had my wallet. Sometimes I just don't feel. But we're going to be talking about Invincible. With the premiere of Season 2 of Invincible dropping pretty soon, it drops next week. I want to get you guys hyped, 42nd season of it. So let's take a look back at Invincible Season 1. What makes the show pretty good? Why the show took the world by storm when it first debuted, when it first came out. Like why everyone loves it. Why I think it works, because it's so... It takes your classic superhero story, but it adds a lot of twists and turns with it and makes it different in this genre that's kind of feels oversaturated this day and age. So let's just talk about it. Before I talk about Invincible, I kind of want to talk about comics in general, how their downfall is leading to the popularity of anime and manga, how that's actually kind of helping Invincible in this scenario. Although it makes sense, let me talk for 1 second. So I'm pretty sure if you guys have been to like Barnes and Nobles, you will see more Japanese manga, Japanese comics, whatever you want to call it. You will see more of that in Barnes and Nobles compared to American comics. The last time I went to a Barnes and Noble, like to find American comic books like Marvel, Image, or DC, it was like a smaller section compared to manga, where like you see like volumes, like books and books of manga, comics, light novels, whatever. You saw more works of Japanese like work almost everywhere in Barnes and Nobles compared to American comics, where it was like in its own tiny sections. You want graphic novels, it's like smaller dedicated section. And why is that? Because it's more popular. Like manga and anime these days has been like on the increase, while the American comic book industry has slowly been going down. If you're not familiar with American comics, they're really convoluted. They're super convoluted. I do have a good amount of comic books right here on my shelf. You can't see it, not this shelf. That's just my niece Sequoia, but you get the point. Comic books are just kind of too convoluted. Let me give you a good example. If you ask someone, would you rather read Chainsaw Man Volume 1, or would you rather read DC Infinite Frontier issue 788, which one do you think they're gonna go for? They're obviously gonna go for Volume 1 of Chainsaw Man compared to Infinite Frontier issue 778. That, I don't think that's a real issue, but you get the point. American comics in general are kind of convoluted. If you look at like Marvel or DC, they be having like reboots almost every like 4 to 5 years. They be having like big events, big like comic book changing events. Just look at any event like the past few years. Look at the all new, all different Marvel, or like Infinite Frontier, or like Infinite Crisis, or the New 52 launch. Like there is so many reboots, constant reboots, continuity constantly changes that it's kind of hard to keep track of what's actually happened compared to the manga industry, where like Chainsaw Man will end at a specific volume, at a specific chapter, and then it'll restart with a different series with the continuation of Chainsaw Man Part 2. It's pretty easy to read. When you think about like that, manga is just so much easier to get into because it's easier to read, easier to collect, and yes, overall cheaper compared to American comics, where it's just so convoluted to get into them. You would have to have like a vast knowledge of comics. You have to be like super into it. Like if you want to recommend someone like a good comic, you have to recommend a specific one, but then you can tell them, oh yeah, read this and this, which like manga, you can just read Volume 1 and then you can just read it all the way. Pretty easy. With comics, it's just more convoluted, and that's why Invincible's kind of different in my opinion, because what Robert Kirkman did with Invincible is pretty brilliant. It starts off pretty generic, classic superhero trope, but then he adds a lot of twists and turns. They feel a bit natural. The story progresses pretty naturally, and the story changes as each year passes on. Like the character tends to age in real time. Like if 1 year for us happens, almost 1 year goes for them in the comic. It flows very naturally compared to something like the current Batman run, where it like changes constantly. The continuity is like up and down. I don't even know what's happening in the latest Batman run. I think he was fighting like a robot, or he got his hand cut off. I don't really remember. I know he went to a different dimension, but the point is, comics these days are just crazy. But with Invincible, you can pick up like volume 1 of Invincible and it ended at like volume 20 or however long it goes. It is pretty simple. You have a beginning, middle, and end, similar to what manga does. You have a beginning, middle, and end. But most American comics these days, like Marvel or DC, there is no beginning, middle, and or end. There's like a beginning, then it goes back to a different beginning, then the end is actually the beginning, and the middle is actually the end. You see what I mean? Like, comics these days are just kind of convoluted, but with Invincible, it's just kind of easier to get into. Like, there's issue 1, then it goes to like issue 150, whatever the case is. It goes very linear, it's very smooth, and it's very easy to follow. Now that I have the explanation out the way, let's talk about Invincible, the show in general. I think one of the main reasons why Invincible works the way it does is it kind of feels like a traditional anime, in the sense that there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. Like, there is a good introduction, there's a good climax, and then there's a good finale that leaves you with more stuff wanting, that leaves you on a big cliffhanger, leaves you wanting more and more stuff. Like, there's no opening. If there was, I think that would be pretty cool, but you get what I mean. Invincible feels like a very traditional anime in the sense that there is a good story, there is rhyme and reason to it, compared to other shows where plot lines change, whatever the case is, it doesn't really have a long-lasting impact. Invincible's kind of different because whatever happens in the beginning of the first episode has an impact almost throughout the entire series. It has an entire, it shakes the foundation of what the series is going to happen, with Omni-Man killing the Guardians of the Globe in the beginning. Towards the end of episode 1, it has like a huge impact. It leaves like a big murder mystery throughout the series, and it leaves everyone wondering, is Omni-Man guilty? Why is he the only one alive? Why is he the only survivor of the Guardians? Did he do this? Even his wife, Debbie, suspect that Omni-Man had something to do with it, but is afraid to do anything. And towards the middle of this season, we get the reveal that we're getting closer and closer to finding the truth about Omni-Man. As Invincible finds out about like his powers, Omni-Man starts to become a little bit more crazy, a little bit more out there. You fear more for him, and towards the climax, towards the finale, we finally see Omni-Man snap and finally go at it at his son, ultimately portraying him as the big bad. Like, he's just menacing, he's just scary. He's a guy who like is very calm on the surface, but behind that calm demeanor, he's very violent. Like we saw in the episode where he goes to that different dimension and he wipes out the planet of the Flaxlands. I think that's what their name was, the Flaxlands. He wipes out that entire species. You get that one song, and then he goes all like demon mode, all Black Air Force energy. He like wipes everyone off that planet. Then he comes back to his normal reality and eats lunch like nothing happened. Like, oh hey Mark, yeah, I had a good day in the other dimension. Like, man, Omni-Man is just scary throughout the entire show. You can feel his presence, you can feel how terrifying he is, and how from the beginning of episode 1 he was set up to be the big bad of the entire season. And with Mark, he's not your traditional superhero in the sense that he has plot armor. No, he has no plot armor. Even despite his name being Invincible, he should be just called Punching Bag, because he gets beaten up throughout the series like a lot. He loses more battles than he constantly wins. Even against his dad, the only reason he won against his dad was because he appealed to his humanity. Like, he did a no talk, no jutsu, you could say, but in that sense, it kind of worked because it's his father and his dad is going to care for him. And when Omni-Man was fighting him and telling him, what will you have after 500 years? You, Dad, I will have you. I kid you not, that scene just kind of had me like, man, it just had me like tearing up. It's like, man, this is such a like deep scene, and you really felt for the characters. Everything that happened, you felt like the impact, similar to what happens in like most anime that you guys probably watch, maybe like Demon Slayer, Dragon Ball, maybe like Code Geass. I'm just naming a few anime off the top of my head. Like, you feel for the characters. When a character dies, you feel for them, and this is what makes Invincible so great, in my opinion, that it feels like a traditional anime because there's a beginning, middle, and end. All these characters, you bond and you care for them. There's so many good side characters. Like, the story itself is pretty fascinating as Mark learns to develop his powers and his abilities. We get to see what it's like for him. He doesn't really want to be a superhero. He wants to just be like a normal kid and balance his life between a superhero and between being a normal day student, but he can't, and everything he does has a consequence and an impact on the foundation of what's going to happen throughout the series. And to me, that is pretty fascinating because it adds so many twists and turns to your average superhero show, to your average superhero series. Like, compared to something like the Marvel films, where they're somewhat loosely, very loosely adapted to the big screen, the animated series of Invincible adapts the series almost to a 10 and 10 perfection, because like, sure, while the comic and the show have slight differences, they're pretty similar in tone. They get the characters right, and sometimes they have word for word everything right. Like, it is like near perfection. It's crazy how like the animated show did the comic so much justice. I would even say like the show is better than the comic, if I'm gonna be honest. Like, the show by itself, it's just really good. It's just really good. All the characters, even Mark, like his journey from being like this nobody to being this superhero to like losing again, we get to see the impact and how he feels about his powers. We get to see his relationship with Adam, Eve develop, almost everyone, including his mother. And that final fight with Omni-Man, it's just different. Like, it is just different, man. I'm just super hyped. But yeah, that's just my video on Invincible, why it works, why it's such a good series, and I'm hyped. I'm just hyped. Till then, I'll catch you guys on my next one.